Today's episode is sponsored by Zola. A different kind of advertising experience built with wedding pros and for wedding pros is here and growing fast. Your couples already love Zola, so stay tuned to find out why you'll love them too. Hey everyone, it's Andy with the Wedding Biz. Well, before we get into today's interview, I want to say I'm just so excited because soon after this interview airs, I'll be meeting my daughter out in Boulder, Colorado for a few days, and then my wife and her boyfriend meet us in Colorado Springs. And this is one of the slowest times of the year for my business and probably for a lot of us. And so I'm taking full advantage of taking time off. And being in the mountains or near the ocean are two of my favorite ways to unwind and reconnect with nature. And I strongly believe that connecting with nature directly helps us reconnect with ourselves. So if you're feeling stressed at this time, I suggest getting out to some kind of nature, even if it's just taking a walk outside. It does wonders for me. Anyway, if you missed last week's episode, there was no episode because of the holiday. And today is a revisit of my original November 2019 interview of Rachel Birthistle of the Lake Como Wedding Planner out of Como, Italy. A wonderful planner and designer who not only works with clients directly, but also has a strong B2B aspect, and so often has the pleasure, as she says it, of morphing into the local team for many foreign agencies, such as planners in the States, and has worked with people like Lisa Vorce on Chrissy, Tegan, and John Legend's wedding, Jung Lee, Colin Cowie, and Robert Fountain. So she is predominantly a wedding planner in a destination rather than a destination wedding planner, though she also does that. And she also has a furniture rental business. So enjoy today's conversation with Rachel Birthistle. Rachel, it is so good to talk to you. It's hard to believe that I'm here in the DC area and you are there in Italy. I think I'd rather be in Italy.
Yeah, it's pretty nice at the moment. The weather's beautiful and yeah, it's a pretty nice place to be. But I'm sure DC is beautiful. I've never been.
Well, and you're at Lake Como, so you isn't from your office. Don't you have views of the lake? Aren't you right there?
Yeah, I have to say I'm rather spoiled with the views that I have from my office. So we're based in Cernobbio, which is near Como city center, and look up the lake. So yeah, it would take some beating, I have to say. It comes with its downsides, but plenty of positives.
No, I can't imagine. Well, now, and aren't you originally from Ireland?
I am Dublin born and bred and lived there until I was 18 and then moved to England to pursue my education in fashion design.
Yes, and I want to come back to that in a minute, but I'm curious, when you were in Dublin and you were a little girl, was there anything at that time going on as far as you having a passion either about fashion design, or events? Was there any connection maybe with your parents or something?
Yeah, so my dad was always in the fashion industry. And so from a very early age, I used to spend my summer holidays in a factory doing all the menial tasks like packing and clipping threads off things, or working in the office when they used to have fax machines and things like that I used to find fascinating to be involved with. But also involved in the factory floor, and from about the age of about, I don't know, maybe I was about 7 or 8. And I remember back to being about 11 and being really, really clear that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to pursue a career in fashion design. And I never wavered. But
what aspect of fashion design? Did you have a specific idea back then?
At that point, I just had this vision of, just drawing pictures of clothes. And I had, because I'd been involved, or not involved, but seen factories and how they worked. I knew there was more to it than a drawing. So I had a very clear picture about what the fashion industry was from very early stages. And I think, I suppose I'd always wanted to be involved in the design side, but knew that there was a little bit more to it than that.
Now, did you dress, differently from your friends back then? What was your sense of fashion like for yourself?
That's a really good question. It caused problems at times because I didn't really conform. And not that I was like saying I was really out there or anything. It was just, I just had a very strong sense of what my style was. And whether that was right or wrong or other people liked it, I didn't really care so much.
Yeah.
So I started making my own clothes when I was at school, because you used to have home economics classes then when you did cooking and sewing and domesticated things like that.
Yes, we had that in the States too back then. Yeah.
And that kind of got me into my first attempt at sewing. And not ever having a huge amount of extra pocket money to buy really fancy clothes, I made my own from quite early on. And some of my friends kind of were very complimentary about what I used to do with the sewing machine, but others just found it just a little bit out there and didn't really like it.
I wish I could see pictures of you at that time. I would love to see what these outfits are.
I should look for some.
That would be really fun. That would be great. Well, so when you then went to school, you said, was it in England? Was it in London where you went to school? After 18, when you moved?
Yeah, after 18, I first moved to the Midlands, and it's when the whole university system was different. So I started off part one of fashion design in the Midlands, and then I moved down to London to start my degree, which I actually never finished because I left early to have my daughter. So, and I started working in the fashion industry at that point, even though I never actually completed my degree.
That's interesting. What was that like for you? I mean, was that a super hard challenge, or were you just thinking, look, this is clear, here's my priority, and I'm going to make it anyway in fashion design? I mean, how did that affect you emotionally, and how did that go for you?
I wouldn't say I wavered very much on the decision at all. I had won quite a big national competition the year before at university, and they were really keen for me to stay on. But I felt fairly confident that I could pave a path for myself in the fashion industry anyway. And I knew people in the industry, and I'd already started working kind of freelance while studying for a couple of companies based in the Midlands. And so I kind of made that decision fairly quickly that I'd be fine. I did that in anything I've done. I make decisions very quickly and think, it'll be fine.
Oh, I love that. See, but that, I've talked a lot about this on the show. I do believe that if you're open to it and you just simply, like you say, it's a leap of faith, isn't it? Just to feel that, look, it's going to work out, then it does work out. I mean, because that's all we know, right? That's how we're operating.
Yeah, totally. And, I just think that, if you enter into a situation like that, whatever it is, with a kind of positive approach, you find opportunities because you're looking for them. And I'm quite a good people person. So kind of networking, which is invariably helpful in finding opportunities, was something that always came quite naturally to me. So, yeah, I am all for, and also just reinventing myself. I've done a few different things during my journey before wedding planning. So, yeah, not afraid to take that leap.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great, just general demeanor to have. So then what happened then? Because I mean, eventually we'll get into the story about how you started your company, but what happened with the dream of the fashion design at that point?
So I started working for quite a major high street retailer in the UK designing, and it was predominantly menswear, but I was involved in all of the sourcing and manufacturing. So I used to travel a lot, both in terms of the design development side of things, but also the actual practicality of the garment production and fabric production. So it was fairly all encompassing, and I really loved it. But then at a certain point, my kids were at an age where being away every 3 to 4 weeks for a week to 10 days was challenging as a parent. But I did that for about 10 years, maybe slightly more. And I really liked it. And also gave me a huge opportunity to see places I would probably never have seen, because we manufactured all over the world. So I got to see countries that, would probably still be on my to-do list.
Wow. And this is in your 20s, no less, right?
Yeah.
So where was the point that you made the transition and a shift? I mean, like you say, you've reinvented yourself several times. When did you decide, apparently, to make a switch from fashion to event?
So the shift first from fashion was, as I said, when my kids were at that point where they just kind of need you around more. And that wasn't when they were little. It was more when they were teens and there was more going on. And so I thought this isn't working very well. And I stopped working in the fashion industry and actually went back to college, and I retrained in sports therapy. So I did injury massage. I trained as a Pilates teacher and various other complementary things to that industry. And I set up a business at home, like a private gym, and kind of injury rehabilitation space and started working with local private hospitals and with, private individuals that either just wanted to have like personal training or personal Pilates lessons, or people who are actually sent from the hospital because they were recovering from knee injuries or back operations or whatever. So I did that for about 6 or 7 years from home before coming over to Italy.
Wow. I had no idea. Okay. And then, wow. And then from there, what happened after 6 years?
And then from there, just things changed in my life and I wanted a new direction. And we had a holiday home in Lake Como for a few years. And I just thought, I'm just going to see what happens. I'm just going to go and it'll be fine. It was that kind of didn't think about it too much.
And there we go again. I love that. Yeah.
And I was teaching Pilates to Italian women and I couldn't speak Italian. In fact, my Italian's still pretty pathetic even after 10 years. But I think they considered they were getting 2 lessons in one. They were getting Pilates and English. So like it was a double whammy really.
Oh, that's great.
I did that for the first 6 to 12 months whilst I kind of found my feet and got introduced to the wedding industry through a local restaurateur who knew a guy that had set up in business as a wedding planner with his wife, who was a photographer, and they needed some help. So I did that for a season and I kind of thought, you know what, I kind of think that I could do this on my own. And it just started from there. And to get it all going, I said, we had a holiday house here. So I thought I'll start renting that out for holidays. And that would kind of generated some income to start the business. And it just grew from there. I don't rent my house out anymore because that's way too much hard work.
Yeah, I would think. So when you first started, I mean, you're jumping in with, I guess, as an event planner and designer, like what aspects of the event industry were you envisioning that you would grow this business into?
I guess from the beginning, I saw that there were 2 obvious gaps in the market here in that industry. And this was just during this first season where I was kind of, totally green and a real novice, but was seeing this other company and how they did it locally. And they covered 3 of the Italian lakes. So it was a little bit bigger an area that we were working in. And I thought, God, there's a real lack of style to what's happening here with weddings versus the little bit of what I'd seen in magazines of weddings in other parts of the world. And also the fact that there weren't many people mother tongue English speaking working here.
Ah, interesting.
And I just thought, now that was the most obvious plus. And that has still been a major positive for the business, even today, because if people are coming to a foreign country, whether it's Italy or Spain or wherever, and spending a sizable chunk of money, and they're speaking to somebody who's not in their mother tongue, I can see why it's unnerving, because it's an unnerving process anyway. All of my clients are foreign. I do nothing for a local market at all. So understanding how clients from abroad, they're managing everything from overseas and spending a large sum of money, it does give them comfort knowing that they're speaking to somebody where nothing is lost in translation.
Yeah, that's interesting. And also, again, for you to feel that you could bring a different style to it. Can you be more specific about that? Like, what was the style, or was there a lack of style that you were seeing, relative to the kind of style you would bring to it? Can you be more specific?
It was just, there was a real lack of resources as well. Like anything that was available in terms of rentals was really basic and very 1980s. And so I remember the first year or 2, we were doing quite small things really. But I then started investing some of my money in what we were doing because I couldn't find stuff to rent. I was having to buy stuff and, invest in what I was doing to create a portfolio to let people see there was more to it than what they'd seen previously for this part of the world anyway. And that's kind of where I started trying to make an effort to change what was available, or to make it kind of easier to do things that were a little bit different, or to at least get the clients to have faith in there being something else apart from that very cheesy red roses, white tablecloths kind of look that was all that was available at the time.
Again, your experience as a fashion designer obviously had to inform that. And I believe, I don't know if it was your website or an article where I saw that you had said, and this is a quote, "My previous career as a fashion designer has given me artistic background and ability to interpret and develop clients' ideas and vision." Can you say more about that?
I think it's something that I started very early on in my career in fashion, where I was having to interpret what the market wanted in terms of, this high street retailer, who their client base was and what they wanted, designing for that, and then, presenting to the buyers what I felt was going to sell. And that is very similar to what I do now with clients, is just understanding my clients and their style, putting ideas together and presenting it to them and selling it to them. So I guess it's a process that I started in a different industry that I've just adapted to the one that I'm working in now. And I don't take a very wedding-y approach to what I do from a design side of things. It's much more of a blank canvas. I never ask new clients to send me pictures of their favorite weddings that they've seen, or trying to get them into a different mindset about the design and style of their wedding from the beginning is a much more creative process. And also because I'm working in a lot of the same villas and same locations year after year, and being a real creative, I want it to be interesting for me as well. As well as I would never want to copy and paste something. I don't want to churn out the same stuff. And so it's quite important for my own creativity and satisfaction to make that process an interesting process every year, and one where there's scope to be different, and to, just go off in different creative tangents. Also for the company, because if we were to do the same stuff year after year, I guess, our shelf life would be way more limited.
Yes. Can you give me an example of your process, literally specifics when you first meet a wedding client, and how you go through this initial discovery phase with them and your thought process? I mean, just anything that's comfortable for you to share would be wonderful. And maybe you could think of a favorite one or whatever you would like.
Because clients generally come over speaking very generally. So on average, clients will do 2 trips out, and they will do one as a kind of scope out and to find the venue that they want. And we also get them to just understand the areas, because invariably it's 3 days of events. So you're looking at more than one venue, and just to make it logistically easier, just to home in on an area where a lot of things can be focused, and accommodations and, practical things. So that trip out, when you meet clients and do those site visits, is a really good time to understand the couple, their dynamic, their style. It's simple things like the way they dress, which is a very obvious way of understanding somebody's aesthetic, but also just in conversations, because we'd spend a couple of days generally with them, and just asking questions and understanding more about their lives and the places they go and the things that they enjoy, and just creating visual references for them from a style point of view, so I can start thinking about the design and creative process early on. That's really initial stages, and just gleaning information. And also, it's really interesting, because when you take people to the same places, so, because obviously, as I said, we end up using the same places over and over. Right. The reactions vary so dramatically that things like that, just how people react to a space or an atmosphere, again, is really helpful in just designing for them. And it's not just aesthetic, but also just putting together a flow of events that is right for that couple, venues that are right for that couple. And also, we very much focus in on the guest experience as well, because we're so familiar with the area here, and it's such a unique place because it's not very big. But in creating contrasting events at interesting locations, I think is something that it makes Como quite unique.
That's interesting what you're saying, having contrast. That's really fascinating to me, that I didn't even think of that, but that, I have not yet been to Como. I know you've generously invited me and to show me around, and I'm definitely going to be coming there. Oh my God. I'm taking you up on that one. So I don't know a lot about it except these stunning photos from all your work. But that is interesting that you want to, I guess, with the flow of the few days, that you want to have contrast.
Yeah. And Como, I think, is quite unique also because of the type of luxury and the type of tourism it has. I think it's, for anybody that hasn't been, it's perceived as like a super chic, super luxury destination. And it is, but it's not like other luxury destinations like Saint-Tropez or, well, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but it's a very understated luxury. There aren't a load of designer boutiques, or it's just much more old school. And a lot of the venues that we use are old villas that are predominantly still privately owned. But the other thing that Como has a lot of is just really nice, interesting little villages and bars and restaurants. And so to have a very spectacular villa as a wedding location, but maybe the night before somewhere very rustic, very simple, very authentic, and then maybe somewhere like the next day after the event with a beach vibe, or again, more modern. It's really nice to be able to create a flow of events that are all very different, with very different environments, very different ambiances. And that's what I love about here.
With Zola, as wedding pros, we have nothing to lose and everything to gain. List your business for free and get pre-vetted leads from the site with one of the fastest growing communities of engaged couples. Zola does things differently and believes in empowering you to get more control of your business. With no required subscription, transparent pricing, and a pay-to-connect model, Zola lets you choose when and how you pay for leads. Get the flexibility you need to succeed and focus on what really matters, growing your business and serving your couples. Join Zola today and experience the difference for yourself. To create your free listing and get your first few connections for free as well, go to zola.com/Andy. That's ZOLA.com/Andy. You know, it's so interesting. It just hit me. So I used to be very involved in songwriting. I actually almost went full time into it. I had an offer for that. But when I was studying the craft of it, especially of the lyric writing and melody, but especially the lyric, one of the techniques was opposites, you know, and if you listen, especially to pop country, I mean, I listen to everything, R&B, all of it, but, you know, the best songs, there's this kind of technique of opposites to really make each part of the song stand out even more by having contrast. So it's fascinating to me that that's what's behind how you're crafting the journey that you're creating for your clients as well, with the environment and the venues that have so much character there.
And that's what I try and do when clients come out for that first visit, is so they have that experience. And so they go back knowing that they can create that for their guests. So they're not just inviting them to a wedding day. They're inviting them to a genuine kind of Italian experience on Lake Como. And I think that makes a difference.
Now, this is interesting. What you just said too is it never occurred to me when they're coming, you know, at first to meet with you and to see the area. And you mentioned earlier in your process, you know, you're really observing their response, you know, each place along the way, which informs you. But also what you just said about you're giving them an experience before the wedding, right? When they come out that first time, you're treating it in a sense as an event.
Yeah, exactly. So like from the time they arrive at the airport, I basically offer to do everything for them. So their airport transfers, when they're here, do they want us to book their restaurants for them, and then just, you know, put together an itinerary that could potentially be similar to the itinerary for the wedding. So they feel looked after in a way that they could potentially look after their guests if they decided to do something similar.
Wow. That is wonderful. You know, and this brings it down again. I think this is on your website. You say that you are predominantly a wedding planner in a destination rather than a destination wedding planner, and that this business model allows you a lot of variation. And that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. And so, whereas I never want to get kind of stuck in one place or labeled with just kind of doing the same thing over and over, we are looking at a few other destinations where we can do what we do here. So I don't really have any interest in being a destination wedding planner at this point in my life, that would fill me with absolute horror. I like going home to my own bed at the end of the day. I don't love living out of a suitcase at all. I did that in my 20s when I was working in the fashion industry.
Yeah.
But what I do really like doing here, and I do feel really passionate about it, is creating that, sequence of contrasting events, of experiences. And so I'm really only interested in working in places where we can get to know them as well as we know Lake Como. So we know that we're giving the best of the best. And so that's kind of on my radar at the moment. We've kind of got a few places that I'm thinking about, and we've got 2 destination weddings next year, one in France, one in Spain. It's the second time that we'll go to Spain. And again, they're relatively close by. Not that I can get back to my own bed at the end of the day, but it means that I don't have to get on the plane for too long. So that's appealing. But as I said, I really, really, really only want to do it if we can do it as well and as thoroughly as we do it here. And the other thing that in being a planner in a destination, is it has given us a mix of different clients. So as well as doing clients directly, I've always been working for other agencies. So every year we'd have like a visiting agency that would need a local team to morph into whatever they needed, like on the ground. So invariably they're American planners, although we've had planners from other parts of the globe as well that have clients for Italy, predominantly Como, and just need that kind of local support. And that's something that we started doing very early on. And that was really useful for me in my experience. I think the first planner that I acted as local planner to was Colin Cowie. And it's quite a few years ago now. But to have that experience with somebody so established and so at the top of what they were doing has been really useful in my learning curve. And every year we still do it. And I've worked with some great people. And it keeps the job very varied, having that kind of B2B aspect as well as client direct.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Colin. That was my first experience in the luxury world too. My first 2 luxury ones were with him, and it was a game changer for me. I'm not just talking about my career, but in terms of my own education and learning. And God, Rachel, I had him on the show twice, and the part 1 especially was an incredible interview of Colin. But yeah, I know that you've worked with a lot of major people. Your website mentions Lisa Vorce and Jung Lee and Robert Fountain, who was on the show too. And I believe you were involved in Chrissy, Tegan, and John Legend's wedding, right? With collaborating with Lisa. I think that was one of the big ones.
Yeah, that was the first time myself and Lisa met, and the first time that I worked for her. And we've worked together subsequently. And I was a really small agency with maybe 2 employees at the time. So that was just such an opportunity. And Lisa's such a pleasure to work with. That was a phenomenal experience.
Well, how do are you able to talk? I imagine you might have signed an NDA. I don't know NDA, but are you able to talk about your work with Lisa and how that goes when you are working with another agency, as you call it, on a wedding like that? Can you say much about your part of it?
I mean, we essentially, with any agency that we work for, we essentially do a very similar job than we do with the client direct. But we just offer a little bit more flexibility to work within the systems and processes that agency has. Because obviously for the business that I do with my clients direct, we have processes and systems in place, and that they're easy to implement because we're dealing directly with the final client. But other businesses have their ways of doing things. And essentially, we are just like a support to whatever way they want to work and whatever they want to execute. So it does change every time. And I've always just morphed into whatever has been necessary for whatever agency and whatever job. So, and in doing that, it's a better learning curve.
Oh, that's right. Because I'm in an interesting position too, in the music and entertainment business. I get to see all these different wonderful planners and designers and creative partners. I don't like to call them vendors, but creative partners. I get to see them at work and learn. And it's unusual for a planner or designer to be able to see so many as well. But in your position, you are getting to work with so many people. That's fascinating.
And it's not often that in any industry, that you get close insights into other agencies in the same industry. At those points in the growth of my agency, they weren't competitors at all. They were far, far, far superior to what I was doing. But to even get that insider glance into how other people operate or, what systems they use, and it was really, really invaluable for me.
Yeah, I get that. Now, also, don't you work with venues more than just simply planning events there, but isn't there some other work that you do with them where you can help elevate their style and their level of reputation and all of that? What is that about?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I suppose the best way that I think that I do that is just, it's not specifically working for any venues. I think just how we work in a venue. We've just got a good reputation for ourselves in how we manage, and also just getting them exposure.
Yes.
Because I do invest so much in design and always seeking out ways to elevate what we're doing from a creative and aesthetic point of view. And like this year, when we've collaborated with Kiana Underwood from Tulipina, that was another amazing exercise to, again, just elevate the aesthetic. And it was, in my opinion, an amazing combination of design skills, because when you set out on a path like that, you don't know how it's going to go. Two creative people, we could have ended up treading on each other's toes but not at all. I mean, she is a total flower artist and amazingly talented. And it meshed really well with how I liked to design the general aesthetic of a wedding. And so that was a really, really, really good creative combination that I hope will continue. And I think it's making those decisions and taking those opportunities to, again, elevate what we're doing also benefits the villas that we're doing it in, because it's getting them more exposure. And, so much of this is back to Instagram and social media, which has its downsides as well, I suppose. But from the wedding industry point of view and from a creative point of view, it's a phenomenal tool.
Yeah, I was going to say, Rachel, I follow your Instagram, and Kiana's been on the show. I follow hers too, and that's an interesting point too. I mean, what you do, and people like Kiana as well, and the photos from some of the best in the world, the best photographers, really do elevate those properties. I mean, they're already amazing. I know they've got great service and all of that, but then you combine it with stunning decor, and it does get them great exposure, and it really shows the possibilities to the rest of us out here, what can happen with a venue.
Yeah, and you said something interesting, Andy. You mentioned photographers, and that's something that is also really important in how we choose or suggest photographers, because there's a selfish element in photography from my point of view. Obviously, matching the right photographer with the right client is important, but also I'm interested in what I get out of it at the end of the day, assuming there's no NDAs or anything like that where we're restricted with use. But having a mix of great photographers across a season is really useful, because, again, of working in the same venues, I don't want them shot in the same way each time. If I had the same photographers again and again, okay, you can change the aesthetic. But if somebody is also getting used to an environment, you run the risk of them always shooting it in the same way, with the same light, or in post-production with the same color palette. And then everything, again, runs the risk of looking samey. And that's not to say that we work with different photographers every year. We don't. Typically, the photographers that we work with are the same ones year after year, but it's a mix of people during the season. And also their audiences on their social media will vary from one photographer to another.
Oh, right. A great point.
So that then just increases our exposure. So whether that's my exposure or whether that's Kiana's exposure, it just keeps everything with the most likelihood of being seen by a bigger audience.
Oh, what a brilliant point. It's interesting. When I was interviewing Kiana, we talked about, a lot of that, because as you probably know, she expanded her business fairly quickly after a couple of years. Then it started to really expand quickly. And And she's known for just also how the photography really showing what she does brings out the art side, the artist side of her. And she was saying how that was also very deliberate. Every single photo that she ever released publicly had to be really curated.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of intention went into it.
Yeah, we're really careful. So my daughter, Tamar, who works for me, well, my son works for me as well, a little bit of a family business going on. She manages our Instagram along with a social media consultant, Donna, that we use in New York. So when we're being very efficient with posting, we're doing it on 2 different time zones. So Donna will post in US time and we'll post European time, so it can keep everything moving quite nicely. That's when we're being really good and really efficient, Andy, and that is not all of the time by any stretch of the imagination. But also because we curate our own libraries of images. So we're really, really specific about keeping the same look and feel to the Instagram feed and the brand.
The brand. Well, here we go. Branding. That's right. So that people are clear. Now, I know that also aren't you doing more corporate and private events as well, and photo shoots too, like for Harper's Bazaar?
Yeah, no, that's always really, really, really nice and really interesting work to do. We've done quite a few now with Carrie Goldberg from Harper's, both here and outside of the country as well. And that's just something totally different and relatively easy because there isn't a bride and groom involved in it. So it's a much more straightforward process. And just, finding venues for those kind of projects and just doing some of the production support as well. It's been fantastic to be able to branch out in that direction. And I hope that continues. And from a corporate point of view, yeah, we also do kind of private parties, some corporate events, but as the company is called the Lakoma Wedding Planner, it kind of restricts us, as it very much kind of does what it says on the tin. And that's why I am just in the kind of hopefully final stages of having a second website, which is just Rachel Birthistle Events, which is kind of geographically non-specific and non-specifically weddings. We could be anything. And that's to kind of also allow me to not be so involved on a day-to-day basis with every wedding that we do, but to have a more general role in certain projects. And also just, again, to increase the likelihood of us being chosen for projects outside of this area and also projects that aren't specifically weddings.
Staying with the business aspect of this, how did you learn to put on a business hat and be able to take your art and apply business to it? Because I know that you now have, I think it's a team of 10, isn't that right?
We're 12 in total at the moment.
Oh, 12, right. So you're managing a growing team. You've got a successful business. You've got to be looking at the numbers and all the rest of that. How did you learn to do that? And was that easy for you?
No, it just is, and it still is, just trial and error and understanding where my skill set starts and finishes and where I need somebody else to fill in things that I can't do. And I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, a finance person. So it was understanding pretty early on when I needed somebody in that role to support and other roles in the company and learning to delegate. And I found that really difficult. And I still find it really difficult because I think it's because I'm really passionate about what I do. And I think I drive some of the people I work with crazy because I'm such a detailed person, especially on the aesthetic side of things. And so it's difficult to let go sometimes. And as the company's grown, I've just kind of had to go with the flow. And I think it's just part of my personality. I don't overplan my life. And I just kind of go with what feels right and listen to my gut most of the time. And invariably, when I haven't listened to my gut feeling on things and made decisions that went against that, they've been the wrong decisions. And I've also got, my parents have always been really helpful in anything that I've done. And they're both very entrepreneurial. And I think that's where I've got some of that spirit. My dad still works as a business consultant and he helps me out as well. So it just works. The one thing that was particularly difficult here and is an ongoing challenge is the language barrier and the cultural differences, which you would assume there not to be so many because we're in Europe, it's another European country, but just that can impact on how people behave and act in business and how they negotiate. And there's bigger differences than you might imagine, but the language one being the biggest. And I have to say, I have been incredibly lazy. I am not a linguist. The language that I learned at school was Irish, which is absolutely useless to me here. It doesn't even have a Latin
You're
base.
so funny. Yeah. Yeah.
So I always use the excuse that I didn't have time. I periodically took lessons in Italian, and just what I've learned really has just been by being thrown into situations where I'm forced to speak. And when I am, I do, and I muddle through, but it's seriously unimpressive.
But also, isn't your team made up of a group of different type of nationalities with a lot of different language capabilities?
Yeah, they're really impressive. I have got an amazing, amazing team. They're predominantly Italian, but with annoying skills in languages where they all speak more than two.
Well, that's typical of Europeans. So that was very intentional, bringing on people with different language abilities and understanding different cultures, right? That sounds like that was on purpose.
Yeah. I mean, I really, really needed a team that were either predominantly Italian speaking with almost fluent English as a second language. Or I have one Canadian girl that's worked with me a long time, and obviously she's mother tongue English, but she was more sensible than I was, and she learned the language when she moved here. So, it's a team with lots of different language skills, and that's essential and absolutely essential, because when we're, executing an event project and my team are on site, they have to be able to communicate with guests and clients as well as vendors. So language skills are very important.
So, Rachel, I've got one more question. You have accomplished already so much. I mean, it's really incredible. Where do you see yourself going in 5 more years? I mean, now I know you say you don't always plan out so much, but do you think about that? Like, where do you want to be 5 years, even more than that?
On a beach drinking a cocktail. I need a long holiday.
Oh my God. Oh yeah. Yeah. I totally can relate to that. But what do you think about business? I mean, I understand you're creating a new website that does not focus on weddings. I think that's a wonderful idea. So is that where you see yourself headed? Is more balance with corporate and social that are not weddings, or where do you want to go?
I'm kind of focusing on that at the moment to see if that can be the thing that I focus on, and the team start to run a little bit more independently with a latecomer wedding planner. Again, as I said, with me overseeing all of the aesthetic. But I'm just going to sort of test that out a little bit next year and see how it works. I guess I just like a little bit more free time. I don't get much free time, Andy. And so that's my main goal right now.
You're going to have to delegate. You're going to have to delegate and trust.
I know. I'm going to have to get better at that. And then also the last couple of years, I started furniture rental business. So we initially started renting only for our own events, but just starting to broaden that client base a little bit and have another string to our bow is something else that interests me. And going back to an earlier comment about there being limited resources available here, that has improved, but it's nothing like what agencies have access to in the US. I mean, in terms of decor items, furniture, whatever, anything from a creative and aesthetic point of view, there's so much choice. And here that's really limited. And I just would like to still grow that area of what we started a couple of years ago. And because I do believe that there is a good market for that. So I'm not done yet.
Well,
I'm still developing different areas, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, but you're talking about wanting more free time. Sounds.
No, and I've just contradicted myself, haven't I?
Listen, I'm in the same boat. I mean, I would love to, have some slowing down or be more productive, more efficient with my time, and yet here I am. I'm expanding. I 2 different businesses at the same time and growing both. I totally can relate. But Rachel, this has been wonderful. I've known about you for so long, and I've just so much wanted to have you on this show. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh my goodness, it's been a pleasure and an honor to be invited. And I'm just, excited that you're going to visit Lake Como soon and I can show you what I've been talking about.
Absolutely. I'm so excited. Well, thanks so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I will look forward to speaking to you soon, Andy.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Rachel Birthistle. Be sure to check out her website, which is thelakecomoweddingplanner.com. You can find her on Instagram and Facebook at Lake Como Weddings. And I want to thank our sponsor, Zola. Remember to go to zola.com/Andy to create your free listing and get your first few connections for free. And next week's guest is going to be photographer extraordinaire, John Dolan. And finally, if you haven't yet subscribed to The Wedding Biz, please do so you know whenever a new episode drops. You can also follow us, particularly on Instagram at The Wedding Biz, and we'll catch you next week.